Chapter 10. Two Big Women in My Life. Back to my life. It's Boxing Day 2017. Last night a show called 300 Years of French and Saunders went out on BBC One to a large number of viewers and some nice comments in the press. So now might be a good time to talk about the mechanics of how shows get made and my life with the two ladies without whom I wouldn't have a career. Mechanics first. Back in April, I got a call from the girl's agent. She is a remarkable woman called Maureen Vincent, who's looked after Dawn and Jen throughout most of their professional lives. She looks after lots of other people as well, but no one, I suspect, who takes up so much of her time. This is partly because neither Dee nor Jay live in London. Dawn occupies a gorgeous house on the edge of a cliff in Cornwall, and Jen lives on a farm in Dartmoor with lots of horses. She once explained her non-appearance at a rehearsal with the extraordinary, "Oh, sorry, I completely forgot that the farrier was coming over." Anyway, back to Maureen, stalwart champion of these two funny women almost since they left the Central School of Speech and Drama and set off towards the strip club in Soho, where their careers began. The very first call I got from Maureen was asking me to see them perform at the New End Theatre, Hampstead. The New End had previously been a mortuary. They did a number of sketches, some funny, some less so, involving teachers and American tourists. They performed to a less than packed but remarkably tolerant audience. I'd already come across Dawn and Jen when they were part of a pilot show I worked on at Granada, a show that remains rightly unbroadcast. Not banned this time, just unbroadcast. It was hosted by the late Derek Jameson, hard-nosed ex-editor of The Express, newshound and actually not a bad guy. We tried to construct a show that might be a bit That Was the Week That Was, 30 years after, a bit satirical and a bit young, a bit tough but still acceptable to advertisers. Those behind it hoped that the show would prove how ITV could move in on what was principally BBC terrain. It didn't work on any level. The show was trying to be all things to all viewers. Derek was there to be the man of the people and deliver the odd scoop. Dawn and Jen and Alexi Sale, brilliant old communist and comedian, were there to be edgy and different. But Granada were nervous about the project, so we involved some slightly less edgy, more comfortable comedians from BBC Radio's Weekending. These guys were doing mainstream material in case the alternative comedians went too edgy and off-piste. It was as though TW3 had been hosted by Jacob Rees-Mogg and Russell Brand. The show was a mess and never made it to air. I recall that one of the writers, Neil Shand, ex-script editor for David Frost, walked out because Alexi wouldn't do a joke that Neil had written about gay sailors on the Royal Yacht Britannia. Shand expected that others would follow him out of the door, but they didn't. This may have been the moment when old comedy gave way to new. So I first worked with Dawn French and Jennifer Saunders over the dead body of a cancelled show in Manchester. Back to the mechanics of making a Christmas special. In April, Maureen rang me to say that 2017 was the 30th anniversary of Dawn and Jennifer's first TV series. A series that had begun with the then head of entertainment and variety, Jim Moyer, saying to his future stars, "I am putting my dick on the table for you girls." This was not an early Kevin Spacey, Harvey Weinstein moment. Far from it. Merely an exhortation to excellence and a measure of Jim's faith in his new protégés. Maureen's 2017 suggestion was that the BBC, a rather different place from the one in which Mr. Moyer's member had been proffered, should be celebrating her clients in some appropriate fashion, perhaps with a parade of their triumphs over the years and a smidgen of new material. An admirable idea, especially as we then learned that her esteemed clients didn't have much availability to write or prepare an entirely new show. Back in the Jim Moyer BBC, this call from an agent might have resulted in a nice lunch to discuss the proposal, before moving it forward to a relatively informal process called offers. The head of a department would meet with the controller of BBC One or Two, and the head of department would offer the controller a range of show ideas. The head of department was a trusted soul in those far-off days, and would usually get instant approval for the shows offered, so that productions could get underway quickly, possibly after another lunch. Rarely were there any disagreements or deviations from the established routine. There was one famous exception, so legend has it, the case of Sid Little and Eddie Large. For those who have forgotten, they were the poor man's Morecambe and Wise. They did sketches, front cloth material, and not hugely accurate impressions. This was their bill of fare, and it was liked, but perhaps not loved by those who liked but didn't necessarily love, well, sketches, front cloth material, and not hugely accurate impressions. They regularly appeared in offers as a returning item on the menu. The controller of BBC One to whom they were being offered on this occasion was Jonathan Powell, an estimable chap who had produced the excellent TV version of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, starring Alec Guinness. He said, "Oh, Jim, let's have no more Little and Large, please. Honestly, they've had their day. They're just not great, and they don't rate." In other words, not enough people watch them. "They are much-loved stars in the show business firmament," retorted Jim. "And you've still got one series on the shelf unshown." "Fine, OK, well, we'll show the one we've got, but no more after that." Jim Moyer did what he always did when the time came to part with artists. He took them and their agent to the Savoy, or was it the Ritz, for lunch. "Now, lads, you've had a good innings, but all good things must come to an end, and I'm afraid this is it. I've fought hard for your cause, but sadly the Channel has decided against another series. I'm sorry, but there it is. Let's drink to better days." Time passed, and eventually, probably in the summer, the final series of Sid and Eddie is taken down from the shelf and broadcast. For the first time, it's scheduled much earlier, at 5:15 on Saturday afternoons. And it does really well, because kids love it. It's a hit. So, at the next offers meeting, Jonathan Powell said to Jim, "We must have another series from Little and Large. They're doing great business for us. Well done. Did you get new writers, Jim?" Cut to the Savoy, or the Ritz, where a new lunch had been hastily arranged. "Boys, we would love to have you back. Let's get the diaries out and work out when you can fit us in." "That's great, Jim," said the guys.
Yeah, that's really great, Jim," said their manager. "But the fees have gone up a bit, I'm afraid, because the show's been such a hit."
"Really? Have they?" said Jim, nervously. "By much?"
100%.
Legend has it they were paid a very substantial amount for their next series. Nowadays things are different, not least because whatever the papers may tell you, the Savoy is well out of the BBC bounds, and the proliferation of channels means that success can lead to offers from many sources. There's also a huge difference in the way in which shows get made. So that even in the case of a show celebrating French and Saunders, which perhaps looks like a no-brainer, I have to go to the head of department, which is now independent, and able to offer shows to any number of channels, who has to go to the BBC commissioning head of comedy, who eventually meets with the channel controller, who says yes or no. In this process, the supplier, me, never directly meets the buyer, the channel. The buyer never gets the chance to look the supplier in the eye and say, "It had better be bloody funny," and the supplier never has the chance to say to the buyer, "It will be, but please broadcast it on a day and at a time when it's likely to do well." Even having secured an agreement from the channel, we then have to discuss money. Comedy, even though it's much loved and desired by the viewer after a hard day at work, is not a priority for the BBC. They're good at it, and always have been, but it's not a priority. The main priorities are drama and news. They get bigger audiences. Drama is much more saleable overseas than comedy, and is much more expensive. There is a much longer moan about finance elsewhere in this book. Warning signs will indicate it, so you can avoid having to listen to it. Let's get back to basics. The production of a one-off special celebrating the joy brought to a grateful nation by French and Saunders. The order of events for a producer/executive producer goes like this. A. Establish when the girls are available to make the show. Are there a couple of weeks when Dawn isn't writing a book, acting for Sky in Delicious, or judging Australia's Got Talent? Will that coincide with Jennifer not doing any major animation voiceovers, guest appearances, or important meetings with farriers? B. Not always a necessity, but if possible, find a writing room and rehearsal room midway between their two houses so they have equal convenience in terms of travel. C. Book a studio that knows how to look after major artists and understands the demands of making shows with a live audience. This isn't quite as easy as it sounds because of the small number of studios left in London that aren't already booked by Simon Cowell, Strictly Come Dancing, or, in the case of what used to be BBC Studios at Television Centre, filled with ITV daytime shows like Loose Women and This Morning. Note to self, find empty shed in London, buy lights, a few old cameras and seats, then wait for bookings and money to roll in.